"You can trust me," Sloane said, her voice soft over the rain. I believed her. I always did. That night, I fell asleep, thinking friendship could survive anything, even my worst secrets. By morning, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Notifications flooded the screen, each one more humiliating than the last. Someone had leaked my private messages, drafts of poems, late-night confessions, voice notes I'd sent in moments of weakness. Every word twisted into a caption. My pain turned into entertainment. My stomach dropped as I opened one link. Maya Ellison's fake vulnerability is getting old. My name was trending on the local creative board, every post a piece of me dissected for sport. I scrolled, numb, until I saw it. The first image came from Sloane's apartment. The curtains in the background were hers. I called her 3 times before she picked up. "Sloane," I said, my voice shaking. "Someone leaked everything." She gasped, too perfectly. "Oh my God." "Maya, are you serious? That's horrible." I waited for her to sound surprised. Instead, her tone softened. "But maybe this will help people see how real you are, you know?" My chest tightened. "They're mocking me." She went quiet. "I didn't do anything, I swear. You can trust me." The words landed like a bruise. I hung up without answering. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady and cold against the window. By afternoon, the gossip page had doubled in reach. Strangers debated my sanity. Screenshots of my texts, cropped, edited, stripped of context, filled every thread. One caption read, "Writers always bleed for attention." I couldn't breathe. I opened my notes app, scrolling through the drafts I hadn't finished yet, the ones I'd sent Sloane for feedback. Half were gone, deleted overnight. The ache in my chest turned sharp. I checked my shared files access had been changed at 2:17 a.m. from her device. My hands shook as I stared at the timestamp. I'd been asleep. When I walked to the co-op that evening, the air felt heavier, like the whole city knew. Evelyn, the manager, gave me a pitying smile. "Hey Maya, rough day?" she asked gently. "You're trending again." I forced a laugh. "Guess I should be grateful for exposure." Her eyes flicked toward the back room where Sloane was setting up a new display. They didn't meet mine again. My chest filled with something hot and bitter. I watched Sloane laugh with someone else, her hair catching the light. She looked untouched, unbothered, almost proud. I turned away before she could see me staring. That night, I sat by my window, the city lights trembling on the wet glass. I replayed her voice in my head. "You can trust me." I whispered the words back, tasting their lie. Trust had been the stage, and I'd been the script. "I have to know the truth," I said quietly, and for the first time, I meant it. The next morning, the city looked washed out, like the sky itself was ashamed of what it had seen. I walked through the narrow streets toward the co-op, each puddle catching my reflection in fragments. My messages still wouldn't stop. Friends, acquaintances, even strangers from writing circles, everyone had an opinion, a theory, or worse, a curiosity. I deleted half of them unread. My voicemail box overflowed with apologies that sounded rehearsed, and one from my ex that began, "I always knew you'd break like this." By the time I reached the cafe beside the gallery, my hands were trembling so hard that I spilled coffee across the table. The barista whispered my name to another worker when she thought I couldn't hear. That whisper stung more than any comment online. I wasn't a writer anymore. I was gossip, content, a warning. Inside the co-op, Sloane was already there, perched on a stool, pretending not to notice me. She smiled the way you do at a stranger whose tragedy you read about. "Hey Maya," she said, light, casual. "How are you holding up?" Her eyes were wide with false concern, too polished to be guilt. I set my bag down slowly. "Fine," I said. "It's been educational," she nodded sympathetically. "People can be so cruel, can't they? They twist things." I met her gaze, steady. "Yeah, they really do." Her smile flickered just slightly, like a light about to burn out. For a second, I thought I saw fear. Then she stood, brushing her skirt. "Anyway, Evelyn wants us to coordinate next week's reading lineup." She moved past me, her perfume leaving behind a trail that made my stomach turn. Evelyn appeared a moment later, holding her phone too tightly. "Hey, Maya," she said, tone hushed, practiced. "Listen, there's some talk going around. Sponsors are nervous about the publicity. Maybe take a step back from posting for a while?" I stared at her. "You mean stop defending myself?" She sighed. "It's just optics. You know how fragile partnerships are." My laugh came out sharp. Right. Optics. She looked away. It's not personal. But everything about it was personal. Every single word. When I left, Sloane's laughter followed me out the door. I stood on the sidewalk, rain beginning again, soft at first, then heavier. My phone buzzed a new post from the gossip page. Exclusive inside Maya Ellison's meltdown private audio confirms obsession with attention. My heart dropped as I pressed play. It was my voice, cracked and shaking, whispering lines I'd recorded months ago during a panic attack. I knew exactly who I'd sent that file to for feedback. I could still remember her reply. "This is raw, Maya. I love it." That night, I sat at my desk staring at the screen until the light from it blurred my vision. Every word, every confession, every late-night message, they weren't mine anymore. I whispered, "How do I prove a betrayal that wears my own face?" The answer came quietly inside me, firm and cold, by turning the light around. The days that followed bled together, one gray morning after another, every hour thick with humiliation. I stopped opening my phone in public. I couldn't bear the half-hidden smiles, the sudden hush when I entered a room. The gossip page slowed down, but the damage didn't. My inbox was still full of strangers, dissecting my pain like a crime scene. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice again. "You can trust me, Maya. I'd never hurt you." I wanted to believe it even now, because if I didn't, then I had to accept the truth. Sloane had gutted my life for attention. I tried to focus on work, on writing, but the words refused to form. My mind kept circling back to the same thought. How did she get those messages? The drafts, the voice notes, the backups? They weren't sent, they were stolen. I started retracing everything. The night before the leak, she'd come over for wine. She'd asked to use my charger, plugging her phone into my laptop. I'd laughed about how old her cable looked, not realizing that a single connection could open everything. I could still see her fingers scrolling through my playlists, pretending to search for music. Every time I replayed it, new details surfaced: how she'd distracted me with a story about an ex, how she'd lingered after I said I was tired. The betrayal had fingerprints now, invisible but certain. I went through my backups, logs, and notes, marking every timestamp from that night. My screen became a graveyard of proof I couldn't yet understand. Late one evening, while combing through my deleted folders, I found something that shouldn't have been there. A photo of my desk, taken from the left side, the angle where Sloane always sat. In the reflection of my monitor, I could see her face, faint and blurry, smiling. The metadata showed it had been taken at 11:23 p.m., 2 hours after she'd left, or so I thought. My chest tightened as I stared at it. I whispered, "You stayed." My apartment suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier, like her presence still lingered in the walls. That night I pushed my desk against the door and slept with the light on. The next morning Evelyn called. "Hey Maya," she said, her tone syrupy sweet. "We're planning a crisis reading next week to reframe the conversation. Maybe you could share something about healing?" I almost laughed. "You want me to perform my humiliation?" There was a pause, then her careful reply. "People sympathize when they see honesty." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. Honesty. That word felt dirty now. Everyone said it like a currency, but no one meant it. I needed facts, not feelings. That night I drove to the riverside, the one place that still felt mine. The air was cold and smelled faintly of iron and rain. I sat on the hood of my car and stared at the water, black and endless. My reflection looked like someone else, smaller, quieter, dangerous. "You think I'll break?" I whispered. "You don't know me." I opened my notebook and wrote one line: "Trust can't be repaired. It can only be traced." The plan started forming right then, slow and precise. I'd find the trail, the proof, every piece she thought she'd buried. And when I was done, I wouldn't just expose her, I'd make sure she could never weaponize truth again. The next week began with silence, but it wasn't peace, it was the kind that hums before a storm. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt that flash of dread, the phantom weight of exposure. I'd deleted all my social apps, yet screenshots kept finding their way to me, sent anonymously by people who thought pity was kindness. My words, rewritten, captioned, dissected. And Sloane? She played the part of loyal friend to perfection. She started posting cryptic stories, black and white quotes about betrayal, about forgiveness. Every one of them dripped with subtext. She wanted to make herself the victim of the story she'd created. Watching her manipulate sympathy was like watching someone repaint blood into art. But something had shifted inside me. Fear had burned off. replaced by focus. I started keeping notes again, not of feelings but of facts. Logins, file access times, shared folders, IP traces, anything that didn't rely on emotion. The obsession was the only thing that made sense. Every night, I sat by my desk with 3 open tabs: the gossip page, the co-op Slack, and my backup cloud folder. I started noticing patterns. Posts always went up between 9:30 and 10 p.m., the same time Sloan hosted her online creative accountability sessions. Half the comments came from newly made accounts with usernames linked to the same recovery email. I traced one and found the handle tied to her old photography blog. It was small, but it was proof. That night I sent her a message, short and sharp. "Funny how they post at the same time you're live." She replied instantly, "Are you accusing me of something?" I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back, just noticing patterns. A few minutes later, she sent another text. "I told you, Maya. You can trust me." That phrase again. Familiar. Poisonous. I didn't respond. I just took a screenshot and saved it in a folder labeled Evidence. The paranoia bled into my days. Every sound made me jump. Every glance felt like a test. Even Evelyn started keeping her distance, which only made me more certain she knew something. I'd see her whispering to Sloan at the gallery, both of them turning slightly when I passed. I started arriving earlier, leaving later, taking pictures of their schedules on the whiteboard. Each entry felt like a breadcrumb. Once, I caught Sloan behind the counter, glancing at her phone, and when she looked up, she smiled too quickly. "You okay?" she asked. "You've been quiet lately." I forced a smile back. "Just writing," I said. "The truth takes time." At home, the paranoia became ritual. I backed up everything twice, printed screenshots, and sealed copies in envelopes labeled by date. It was obsessive, but control was the only thing that kept me sane. I even printed her last text, "You can trust me." The words that had started it all now sat pinned above my desk like a warning. I stared at them until they stopped meaning anything, until trust itself became just another artifact, something you could archive, dissect, timestamp. Then, one night around midnight, while scrolling through old photo backups, I found a clue that made my breath stop. It wasn't a screenshot, it was a screen recording, dated 3 weeks before the leak. The thumbnail showed Sloan's reflection in my laptop camera, opening a shared folder labeled Voice Drafts. She was smiling. My stomach turned to ice. I whispered to the empty room, "You filmed yourself stealing from me." I saved the clip twice, naming it the beginning. The fear was gone now. What replaced it wasn't rage, it was precision. She wanted to play stories? I'd give her one she couldn't rewrite. By the next morning, I knew what I had to do. Proof meant nothing if it lived only on my hard drive. Screenshots could be dismissed, but metadata couldn't lie. I needed help, someone who understood the kind of digital footprints people like Sloan didn't even realize they left behind. That's when I remembered Rowan Tate, my quiet next-door neighbor. He was a cybersecurity student, the kind of person who noticed things others missed. We'd spoken a few times in the hallway, mostly about printer issues and late-night noise from the co-op. He once joked that every photo tells 2 stories, the one you see and the one buried in the file. That line replayed in my head all morning. By evening, I knocked on his door, my laptop clutched like evidence in a trial. Rowan opened the door, hair a little messy, glasses crooked, eyes immediately sharpening when he saw my face. "Hey, Maya, you look like someone who's been awake for 3 days. I almost laughed. "Close enough. I need help." His smile faded. "Come in." His apartment was small, filled with half-built computer rigs and old books stacked against the wall. I sat at his desk and opened the folder labeled The Beginning. For 5 minutes, I explained everything from Sloan's fake sympathy to the leaked messages and the recording I'd found. Rowan listened without interrupting, nodding slowly, fingers tapping against his mug. When I finished, he leaned forward. "You said she connected her phone to your laptop?" I nodded. "Then she didn't just take files, she mirrored your backup path." He pulled the laptop closer, typing fast. Lines of code scrolled across the screen like falling rain. "See this?" he said, pointing to a timestamp. "That's your backup sync log. Someone accessed it from a secondary device using a shared key, probably copied during that charger trick." My stomach turned. "So she has everything?" "Not everything," he said calmly. "Just what she thought she could use. But every action leaves a digital shadow." He clicked open the recording again, frame by frame. "Look here," he said, pausing at a reflection of Sloane's phone screen. "This tiny icon, see it? That's a data export symbol. If we can match it to the hash of one of your leaked screenshots, we'll have undeniable proof she created the copy." For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to hope. "Can you do that?" I asked. Rowan smiled faintly. "Give me 48 hours. He handed me a flash drive. "Save everything else you find here. Don't upload it anywhere. Don't even email yourself." His voice was steady, almost protective. "If she's still accessing your cloud, you can't give her another opening." I nodded, my hands gripping the drive like it was a lifeline. Before I left, Rowan said something that stuck with me. "People like her think exposure is control, but once you turn their own reflection against them, they panic. That's when the truth gets loud." The words echoed in my mind as I walked home through the drizzle. For the first time, the night didn't feel suffocating, it felt electric. Back in my apartment, I closed the blinds, backed up my files again, and labeled a new folder, Phase 2. Inside, I placed a single document titled Proof of Trust. It wasn't just evidence. It was a beginning. This time, the story would be mine to tell, and I'd make sure every pixel screamed her name. Rowan kept his word. 2 days later, he showed up at my door holding a small external drive and a takeout bag that smelled faintly of sesame and coffee. "Eat first," he said, setting it on my counter. "You'll need energy for what comes next." I hadn't realized how hollow I looked until I caught my reflection in the microwave eyes. Shadowed, jaw tight. "Did you find anything?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he connected the drive to my laptop and opened a folder labeled Chain of Trust. What I saw made my breath catch. It wasn't just timestamps or random screenshots anymore. It was a full trail every moment she'd accessed my files, every image she'd exported, and even the Wi-Fi location logs from her apartment that matched the posting times on the gossip page. "It's her," Rowan said simply. "There's no question." I stared at the screen, at the digital proof glowing cold and blue. Each line was a small betrayal, factual, undeniable. "How did you even get this?" I whispered. He leaned back in his chair. "Your shared metadata was sloppy on her end. She's careless because she thinks she's invisible. People like her always are." He clicked on a final folder marked Images. Inside was a single file. "That one," he said, "is the key." I opened it. A screenshot from her phone camera roll showing one of my deleted drafts still in her gallery. The EXIF data attached had her device ID, battery percentage, and location. My hands trembled as I read it aloud. "Taken at 10:41 p.m. from Sloan Mercer's iPhone." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The sound of rain against the window filled the silence. Finally, I said, "This could destroy her." Rowan nodded slowly. "It'll destroy her credibility, not her humanity. That's an important distinction." His words hung in the air. I wasn't sure which version of justice I wanted more. "So what do I do now?" I asked. He looked at me carefully. "You build your record, quietly. You can't expose her yet. She'll deny it, twist it, gaslight everyone until you're the villain again. You need one final confirmation, something she can't spin." That night, I sat at my desk again, the external drive beside me like a weapon humming softly. I scrolled through the logs, each timestamp burning into my brain. I remembered all the times I'd defended her, all the nights we'd stayed up writing about vulnerability and loyalty. I remembered how she'd once said, "You write best when you're bleeding." Maybe that's why she'd cut me. For the art. For the spectacle. I sent her a text that evening, not confrontation, not confession, just bait. "You were right. People love the drama. Maybe I should just post something new to redirect it." 10 minutes later, she replied, "Don't. It'll only make things worse. I told you, you can trust me." I smiled faintly, screenshotting it immediately. "Perfect," I whispered. Every lie she repeated was another breadcrumb in the chain Rowan was building. Before I went to bed, I saved the folder 3 times, one on a hidden cloud drive, one on the flash, and one printed and sealed in an envelope labeled Final Proof. The fear was gone now, replaced by purpose. I didn't know yet how I'd expose to her, but I knew this. When the moment came, the truth wouldn't whisper, it would roar. The revelation didn't come in a burst, it came in pieces, quiet and undeniable, like glass cracking under slow pressure. A week after Rowan handed me the drive, I sat at the co-op pretending to read while Sloan hosted her usual creative open forum. Her voice carried across the room, warm and practiced, like a singer who never missed a note. "Vulnerability is power," she said, smiling at the crowd of hopeful writers. But only when you own your story. The irony almost made me laugh. Every word she said was one she'd stolen from me, lifted directly from my old voice memos. I could hear my phrasing, my rhythm, even the pauses I used when I got emotional. Watching her recite my pain as performance made my stomach twist. After the event, people crowded her, showering her with compliments. She beamed, taking it all in, like betrayal had a spotlight and she'd earned it. I stayed seated, phone in hand, pretending to scroll. Rowan's program ran silently in the background, tracking nearby Bluetooth and Wi-Fi signals, mapping devices within range. When Sloane's phone synced to the co-op's router, her device name popped up. Sloane, M, IP 12. My heart pounded. I opened a folder on my phone marked Chain of Trust, Live Sync. A small notification blinked. Auto backup in progress, 47 files transferred. She was syncing again. Stealing. Right here, right now, in front of everyone. I stood quietly and slipped into the back hallway, pretending to take a call. Rowan's voice answered when I whispered, "It's happening." I could hear typing on his end. "She's backing up your drafts in real time," he said. "Don't stop her. Let her finish." "Why?" I hissed. "Because the system records her IP during upload. Once it completes, the packet signature ties directly to her account. You'll have irrefutable proof." I leaned against the wall, watching her through the glass. She laughed, hair gleaming under the lights, while the evidence built around her like invisible fire. Minutes later, Rowan said, "Got it. Transfer complete. Her IP, device ID, and access log all confirmed." I felt lightheaded. "That's it?" He exhaled. "That's the end of her mask." I watched Sloane wrap up the event, hugging guests, glowing under their admiration. The applause hit like static in my ears. When she finally spotted me in the corner, her smile faltered for the briefest second, just long enough for me to see recognition in her eyes. She knew something had changed. I walked toward her slowly, meeting her halfway. "You did great up there," I said softly. "Almost like you'd lived it yourself." Her jaw tightened. "I'm just sharing experiences," she replied evenly. I leaned closer. "Some experiences belong to other people, Sloane. You might want to check your backups." I left before she could respond. Outside, the air was sharp and electric, the city lights reflecting off the puddles like fractured glass. My hands trembled, not from fear but from release. I texted Rowan one word, proof. He replied instantly, "It's all secured. She can't erase this." For the first time in months, I felt my lungs fill completely. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. She had built her success out of my blood, and now every digital shadow she'd tried to hide behind had turned into a mirror. That night, I opened my journal and wrote, "She built an empire from my voice. Now it's time she hears her own echo." That night, sleep refused to come. I sat by my window, watching the streetlights flicker like blinking warnings, each one whispering that truth was closer than ever. Rowan's evidence filled my screen: timestamps, IP logs, device IDs, all lined up in ruthless precision. There was no room for denial. She had stolen my words, my voice, my identity. The betrayal had been intimate, deliberate, and brilliantly cruel. I thought exposing her would feel like triumph, but it didn't. It felt like grief, thick and slow, seeping into everything. Because the person who ruined me wasn't a stranger. She was the one who once held my secrets like they were sacred. That realization hurt more than the leak itself. I scrolled through our old messages, each one now evidence. "You're my sister in all but blood," she'd written once. "I'd never let anyone hurt you." I stared at the words until my vision blurred. How many times had she rehearsed the lie before saying it out loud? How long had she been building her little theater of trust? Every compliment, every piece of advice, every night she'd stayed late at my place, editing my work, it was all part of the setup. Betrayal wasn't spontaneous. It was architecture, and she'd designed mine perfectly. Around midnight, Rowan called. "You should see this," he said quietly. I opened the shared drive. He'd updated. Inside was a new folder titled Revisions. It contained drafts of my essays but edited in Sloane's hand. She'd rewritten lines to make me sound unstable, self-absorbed, ungrateful. She'd inserted fake timestamps and exported them as if they were my originals. My voice, my tone, my cadence, all weaponized. I stared at one essay in particular, one I'd written after a panic attack. She'd added a paragraph where I supposedly admitted to faking vulnerability for attention. She wanted to destroy your credibility, Rowan said. That's not just exposure, that's manipulation. My hands went cold. She didn't just leak me, I whispered. She rewrote me. He didn't speak for a moment. Then, softly, that's the worst kind of theft. His words landed heavy. I closed the laptop and just sat there, trembling. For months, I'd tried to figure out why she'd done it for money, for envy, for fame, but now I saw it clearly. It wasn't about gain. It was about power. She wanted control over the narrative, over me, over how the world saw both of us, and I'd handed her the tools to do it because I believed friendship meant safety. The collapse came quietly. The next morning, I received an email from the co-op board. Due to recent concerns regarding privacy breaches and internal conflict, both your and Sloane's memberships are suspended pending review. I laughed aloud, sharp, humorless. She'd managed to drag me down with her. I texted Rowan, "She's still winning." His reply came fast. "Not for long. The proof speaks louder than her lies." Still, it hurt. I packed my things from the studio that afternoon, every object feeling tainted. Her laughter echoed in every corner, her fingerprints invisible but everywhere. On my way out, I caught my reflection in the gallery glass. I didn't look like a victim anymore. I looked like someone on the verge of something dangerous. At home, I opened my notebook and wrote just one line: "If she made my pain public, I'll make her truth undeniable." Then I circled it twice. I wasn't going to beg for justice anymore. I was going to build it myself. I woke before dawn and breathed in the cold city air. Small rituals steadied me: tea, labeled folders, and locked digital vaults. Rowan arrived with takeout and technical calm exactly as promised. We set the drives on the kitchen table, lights low, focused. He spoke softly about hashes, timestamps, and incorruptible metadata trails. Every file became a piece of armor against stories made from rumor. I printed copies beside that morning's newspaper for undeniable provenance records. Ink smelled like evidence, oddly comforting against the freeze of betrayal. I boxed artifacts, voice notes, drafts, screenshots, each sealed with care. Control returned slowly, measured in files copied, and breaths counted. That afternoon I walked to the river to practice steady breathing. Water moved without agenda, reminding me motion could be peaceful and relentless. I sat on the low wall, journal open, pen poised, attentive. My entries named facts, not feelings, to anchor the narrative in truth. I photographed current news pages beside my printed drafts for timestamp verification. A young couple paused nearby and complimented my neat stack of pages. Their kindness was ordinary, grounding. Humanity showed up where headlines failed. Rowan texted a simple update: hash confirmed, one more piece needed. The river taught me patience. Revenge needed structure, not spectacle. I folded the journal closed and felt my vow settle like rock. That evening I called Priya, a media lawyer recommended by a friend. Her voice was professional and immediate, offering steps to preserve legal standing. She advised notarizing copies, time-stamped affidavits, and certified backups off-site. We scheduled an intake meeting to review evidence in 2 days. Before hanging up, she said softly, "Control the pack narrative. Don't amplify noise." Her counsel felt like armor, a measured response to chaotic exposure. I printed a formal timeline and left copies with Rowan and an attorney. Each signature on those pages added weight to the quiet case. Rowan promised secure storage and a redundant chain of custody online. I felt less like prey and more like a planner returning home. On Saturday, I invited 2 close friends for tea by the studio. They arrived with pastries and quiet eyes, offering presents without questions. We sat in a small circle, each holding a candle for steadiness. We didn't speak of betrayal. We spoke of weather, recipes, and small joys. Comfort tasted like tea and soft conversation that did not demand proof. Their ordinary company felt revolutionary, a quiet rebellion against public spectacle. At dusk, I walked alone to the river and watched ducks settle down. I tossed a pebble and whispered the names of pieces I'd reclaimed. The ritual felt small but fierce, enough to restore my center. When I returned, my inbox felt less like a battlefield than before. In the following days, I rehearsed aloud, recording my voice on new devices. Every recording saved with unique file names and printed transcript beside it. I annotated drafts, highlighting lines Sloane had altered or removed entirely. Each annotation included source metadata and screenshots for immutable proof. I practiced reading one piece until my voice didn't tremble anymore. The rehearsal transformed fear into rhythm, grief into a controlled breath. Rowan installed a silent logger on a spare device for redundancy. Priya instructed me to avoid public accusations until counsel filed notices. That legal buffer felt like scaffolding under a fragile, honest structure. I slept that night with evidence locked and a quieter heart. Morning came and I walked through the gallery with collected proof. People greeted me cautiously, their curiosity tempered by evidence's gravity. Evelyn offered hollow sympathy and asked if I needed support. I nodded, accepting practical help but refusing performative displays of concern. Rowan messaged me a reassurance. All copies are secured and encrypted. I set the binder aside for now, not yet ready to deploy. The calm I felt was strategic, not naive, chosen like armor. I repeated the vow silently, not as plea but as promise. My truth would be precise, mapped, and beyond their ability to alter. When it was time, I would turn the light on without mercy. I moved through the days like someone collecting fragile glass, careful, quiet, cataloging every betrayal with meticulous breath and steady hands as if each file could become a lifeline when truth arrived. I learned to eat slowly again, to sleep in measured increments, and to let Rowan's presence at my door be the ordinary anchor I needed while we built evidence like artisans crafting an unbreakable archive to hold against story and rumor. At the river, I rehearsed my voice until the tremor left, reading lines into a recorder that Rowan secured with checksums and duplicates, each recording stamped with time, and the newspaper page I'd placed beside the microphone for provenance's sake. Priya guided me through phrasing for legal impact, teaching me how to make allegations precise and defensible without feeding the gossip machine or provoking premature, chaotic exposure that would let them rewrite the narrative in public. I printed the ledger with screen captures and signed affidavits, sealing copies with wax and placing one set in a safety deposit box, because people who weaponize intimacy often assume permanence and ignore physical proof in favor of rumor and rumor's malleable memory. In late-night conversations with Rowan, we traced her digital footsteps until they formed a map, and when the map aligned with the Times posts appeared and sponsors contacted Evelyn, I felt the hot clarity of inevitability rather than sweet relief. I practiced, walking into rooms where people watched me ask normal questions and smiled at my ordinary phrases, learning to let curiosity turn into quiet pressure that would later ask for answers under oath and in print. Each morning, I placed another item in the binder I planned to hand her like a gift, an elegant object of closure that would trigger the audit and the lawyer's letters if disturbed because my revenge was not spectacle but inevitability. Polite and procedural and incapable of being gaslit away. When friends came by, I let them hold the space for small talk, for mundane kindness, because spectacle eats people alive and I refused to feed it. Instead, I cultivated ordinary witnesses who would later remember the seasons of a friendship unwinding without shame. In the evenings, I rehearsed my final reading, choosing words that both read like memoir and like documentary evidence, selecting phrases that contained watermark words only present in my drafts and recordings so that when she quoted me on stage or online, the act would authenticate the theft and bring her own voice into the light as its witness. The plan needed elegance, not noise. Revenge that shouted was easy to discredit, but revenge that whispered in documents, links, and timestamps would live forever. Rowan and I spent nights perfecting the trap, refining every detail like it was performance art. We built what he called a honeylink ledger, a system that embedded unique digital fingerprints in every file I shared. Each invite, each document, even each quote, carried invisible identifiers that could trace back to whoever leaked it. "She won't be able to help herself," Rowan said. "You just have to give her the illusion of access." That became our mantra. Give her the illusion. The opportunity came when Evelyn announced a Trust and Truth showcase at the Co-op. The irony was delicious. Sloane, predictably, offered to headline it with a new spoken word piece about integrity. I volunteered to curate the evening, acting polite, professional, detached. No one suspected a thing. Behind the scenes, Rowan helped me prepare a collection of new writings, real ones, but sprinkled with those hidden watermark phrases. Each one was designed to sound like me, raw and open, the kind of vulnerability Sloane couldn't resist stealing. Each file had a distinct fingerprint tied to her invite link. When she opened it, the system would quietly log her IP, device ID, and the exact second of access. "She thinks she's smarter," I whispered to Rowan as we finalized the uploads. "Good," he replied. "Arrogance leaves the best footprints." Meanwhile, Priya prepared the legal groundwork. She crafted the retraction demand letters, drafted a preliminary cease and desist notice, and scheduled them for automatic release the night of the event. "You'll need to act calm," she said. "When she falls, don't gloat. People believe the quiet ones." Her voice was Askew's, steady, deliberate, and it gave me a strange peace. This wasn't chaos anymore, it was choreography. Every player had their mark, every cue was set. All I had to do was perform my role. The day before the showcase, Sloane texted me for the first time in weeks. "You've been quiet. You okay?" I almost laughed at the hypocrisy. "Just focused on the show," I wrote back. She replied with a smile emoji, followed by, "Good. We all need a little closure." I read that line twice, wondering if she even understood what closure really meant. Then I sent her the final version of my exclusive reading draft, the one embedded with the most intricate tracking pattern, a trap disguised as trust. That night, I sat by my window again, the city lights blurring into a steady hum. I should have felt anxious, but instead, I felt composed, like the quiet moment before a conductor raises the baton. I wrote one more entry in my journal. Tomorrow, she performs honesty. I perform truth. I slid the notebook into my bag beside the binder of evidence and the flash drive. Rowan had promised to monitor everything live from his apartment, while Priya timed the legal drop to hit her inbox minutes after the first confirmed leak. Everything was ready. I practiced my reading once more before bed. The story I'd chosen was about betrayal, but not mine. It was fictional, layered, poetic, about a woman who mistook a reflection for a friend. Each line carried a buried code, subtle and untraceable to the human ear, but screaming with metadata to anyone who looked deeper. It wasn't just art anymore. It was a record of survival, written in the only language betrayal understood: exposure. By the time dawn came, I was no longer afraid of what she might do. The game was already over. She just didn't know it yet. The night of the showcase arrived with an eerie calm that felt rehearsed, like the city itself was holding its breath. The co-op was glowing under strands of amber light, every table crowded with artists, sponsors, and local press looking for inspiration or gossip. I arrived early, binder in hand, hair neatly tied back, face unreadable. My calm wasn't fragile anymore. It was deliberate, polished into something Sloane wouldn't recognize. Evelyn greeted me at the door with her usual too-sweet smile. "You look lovely," she said, voice stretched tight. "Big night for all of us." I nodded, returning her politeness like a mirror. "It really is." I could see the anxiety behind her eyes. Sponsors were already nervous after the rumors. She needed this event to restore credibility. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Sloane arrived late, as always, dressed in soft gray silk that shimmered under the lights. She knew how to command attention without asking for it. The crowd turned when she entered, as if she carried gravity in her walk. "Maya," she said warmly, air-kissing my cheek, her perfume sharp and expensive. "You curated this. Beautifully," I smiled back. "I'm glad you think so. It's all about authenticity tonight." Her smile didn't falter, but I saw her throat tighten just slightly. Good. She still thought she was in control. Rowan had set up a silent system in the background, a laptop hidden in a sound booth linked to his apartment where he'd be monitoring signals. The Honeylink ledger was live, ready to trace any digital footprint leaving the building. Each reading file had unique tracking codes embedded in its metadata. Every word I read tonight would be bait. I checked my phone. One text from Rowan blinked on the screen. "Ready. She opens anything. We'll know," I replied with a single period. The event began. Evelyn took the stage first, welcoming everyone with that rehearsed blend of grace and desperation. "Tonight," she said, "we celebrate honesty, creativity, and the courage to share ourselves." The irony nearly made me laugh. When she called my name as the first reader, I walked to the microphone slowly, the weight of silence behind me. The room dimmed, leaving only the warm spotlight. I began reading. My piece was titled "The Quiet Theft." The audience thought it was fiction. Maybe it was, in some way. The story followed two friends, one who loved deeply and one who collected secrets for sport. As I read, I could feel the room still, their breaths syncing with my words. I looked up once and found Sloane watching me, chin tilted, eyes narrow, calculating. Every sentence I spoke carried watermark phrases only she and I would recognize from my stolen drafts. Every phrase whispered, "I remember what you took." Halfway through the reading, I saw her glance at her phone beneath the table, thumbs moving quickly. Rowan's text appeared seconds later. Access detected. Sloan, M, IP, 12 connected. Upload in progress. My chest tightened not from fear, but from satisfaction. She couldn't resist. She was forwarding my exclusive file in real time, likely to her. Secret burner handle. To post before I even finished the story. The arrogance was breathtaking. I took a slow breath, letting my tone soften for the last line. Trust, I read, is a mirror we hand to someone, praying they won't drop it. But some people like the sound of shattering. Applause followed, warm but heavy, uncertain whether to clap for beauty or pain. I stepped off the stage, pulse steady, and walked past Sloan. She reached out to squeeze my hand. That was powerful, she said. You've really found your voice again. I met her gaze and smiled faintly. Thanks. I had help finding it. For the first time, I saw her expression falter something behind her, confidence twitching with unease. She felt it, even if she didn't understand it yet. When the next reader took the stage, I slipped into the hallway and checked my phone. Rowan's message appeared in rapid bursts. Confirmed transfer. Screenshot attached. File hash verified. She's tagged herself. I opened the image. It showed her device ID, IP address, and the timestamp of her upload all embedded in a document labeled The Quiet Theft, Final, PDF. My name glowed faintly in the corner beneath the line, shared by Sloane Mercer. I exhaled slowly, leaning against the wall as laughter drifted from the main room. Priya's email notification came next. Cease and desist delivered. Legal timer initiated. Public filing in 24 hours. The machine had started. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the satisfaction settle not as triumph, but as balance. This wasn't fury. This was correction. When I returned to the main hall, Sloane was gone. Evelyn stood by the stage, phone in hand, face pale as paper. Whispers spread fast, something about a post being deleted, a sponsor calling mid-event. The music faded awkwardly as people began murmuring. I stood near the doorway, watching it all unfold. My calm felt unnatural against the chaos. For the first time, I didn't need to defend myself. The truth was already working, quietly dismantling her image piece by piece. Outside, the night was cold and electric. I walked to the river, where the city lights shimmered like tiny confessions on water. I called Rowan. It's done, I said. He sounded almost relieved. Yeah, he replied. She's finished. I smiled faintly, the wind tugging at my hair. No, I said softly. She just started seeing herself. The next morning began like any other gray light over wet streets, the slow hum of traffic, but beneath it all, the air carried tension. My phone buzzed constantly, notifications flaring like sparks. Every outlet in town was covering the same headline. Local writer's privacy scandal expands co-op member implicated in data theft. The article was surgical, almost gentle, but it named her, Sloane Mercer. My tea went cold as I read each line, the precision of Priya's work gleaming in every word. They didn't embellish. They didn't dramatize. They simply presented the proof timestamps, metadata, device logs, expert verification. I'd always believed justice needed a scream to be heard, but it turned out the soft click of documentation was louder. Within hours, the gossip page deleted every post about me. Their apology statement was pitiful. We regret any harm caused by misrepresentation. No direct mention of her, of course. They were protecting themselves, but the damage was done. The screenshots had already gone viral, copied and shared by the same people who once mocked me. Sloane's followers turned on her overnight. Hashtags appeared, number stolen words, number trust is not content. People began dissecting her past readings, comparing them to my archived pieces. The overlap was undeniable. My phrasing, my rhythm, even the emotional inflection, she'd stolen it all. I didn't need to speak. The crowd did it for me. Evelyn called just before noon, her voice trembling. Maya, I didn't. I know, she stammered. She told me everything was hers. I closed my eyes. You helped her, I said quietly. Whether you meant to or not. Silence stretched across the line until she whispered, What happens now? I looked out at the rain streaking down the glass. Now? I said. She lives with the truth she built. I ended the call before she could answer. By afternoon, Sloane released a statement of her own. It was long, wordy, and full of the kind of pseudo-apologies people give when they still believe they're the victim. I never intended to harm anyone. The overlap between our creative voices was unintentional. I wish Maya peace. Peace, the word burned. She still thought she could rewrite the ending, turn confession into performance. But this time, no one applauded. Her sponsors dropped her within hours. The co-op announced an indefinite suspension pending investigation. Even her burner handle disappeared, the page replaced by a cold notice, user, removed for policy violations. That night, I walked to the co-op. It was empty. Lights dimmed, the smell of stale coffee lingering in the air. Her framed photo on the featured artist wall had been taken down, leaving behind faint tape marks and dust. I stood there for a long time, the silence humming around me. I thought I'd feel joy or vindication, but what I felt instead was weightless, like grief had finally exhaled. Rowan met me there, his hood pulled up against the drizzle. "It's over," he said. "She's officially done." I nodded, watching the rain slide down the window. "She's not done," I murmured. "She's just been seen." He looked at me carefully. "You okay?" I laughed softly, not bitterly, just tired. For the first time in months, yeah, I think I am. We stood there a while, listening to the rain tap the glass, the rhythm slow and steady. Then I took out my phone and played the last voice note she'd sent me, back when we still called each other family. "You can trust me," she'd said, light and warm, a lie wrapped in friendship. I played it once, twice, and then deleted it. That small act felt like closing a wound with my own hands. Over the next few days, everything unraveled exactly as planned. Priya handled the statements. Rowan compiled a final report for the board, and I did something I hadn't done in months. I wrote freely. My first new essay wasn't about her. It was about the silence that comes after betrayal, the sound of your own breath when no one is left to distort it. When I finished, I didn't post it. I printed it and left it on my windowsill, letting the morning light touch the paper. Not every truth needs an audience. Some are meant to live quietly, proof of survival, not revenge. On the 5th day, a letter arrived, no return address, just my name in her handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was one sentence. "I thought exposure was power. Now I know it's prison." I folded it carefully and placed it in the binder labeled Chain of Trust, between the first screenshot and the final statement. Not as forgiveness, not as closure, just as record. She had finally told one truth, and that was worth documenting. That night, Rowan called. "You're really done now, aren't you?" he asked. I looked at the empty co-op building across the street, its windows dark. "Yeah," I said softly. "The story's over." There was a pause, then his quiet voice. "Then write a new one." And for the first time in a long time, I smiled, not for revenge, not for victory, but for the clean, quiet space that comes after both. By the following week, the noise had faded, but the silence it left behind was heavier than any scandal. The co-op's doors remained closed for administrative review, the posters in the window curling from rain. The same people who once avoided eye contact with me now lingered near the cafe table I'd reclaimed, pretending to bump into me, offering sympathy wrapped in guilt. "You must feel vindicated," one said. I smiled faintly. "I feel tired." They meant well, but what none of them understood was that vindication isn't healing. Truth doesn't stitch the wound, it only stops it from festering. I'd spent months fighting to be believed, and now that I was, I found myself yearning for something quieter, obscurity maybe, or peace that didn't depend on public opinion. The first message from Sloane came through an unknown number 2 days after her name stopped trending. Just 3 words, "You won." I stared at the text, unreadable even to myself. I typed. No one did, but didn't send it. Instead, I powered off my phone and left it on the counter. Rowan had once told me that closure doesn't always come from confrontation. It comes from refusal. I poured myself tea, let the water hiss against the cup, and watched steam curl like release. In that moment, I realized the most powerful thing I could do wasn't to respond. It was to disappear from the conversation entirely. Evelyn called again that afternoon, her voice low and resigned. "The boards dissolved the co-op," she said. "Too much fallout. Sponsors pulled out." I paused, letting her words sink in. "And you?" I asked. She exhaled. "I'm leaving town. Can't build trust again in a place that saw me break it." I said nothing. Her silence filled the line like apology. "For what it's worth," she added quietly, "you deserved better friends." I ended the call with a polite goodbye and a strange sense of pity. Betrayal had rippled outward, touching everyone who pretended they were just bystanders. No one leaves gossip clean. By evening, I found myself at the river again, the same place I'd once come to grieve. This time, I brought no notebook, no evidence, just a paper cup of coffee and my thoughts. The water moved steadily, uncaring of headlines or apologies. I whispered into the wind, "You can. Trust me." The phrase no longer hurt. It felt like an echo from another life, a warning I'd outgrown. The lights along the bridge shimmered like truth constant, indifferent, untouchable. I took a deep breath and finally let her voice fade. Over the next few weeks, I rebuilt quietly. Rowan and I co-authored a workshop proposal on digital ownership for creatives, something tangible that turned pain into education. Priya connected me with a small publisher who wanted essays about truth in storytelling. I accepted, but with one condition. No names, no villains, just lessons. The editor agreed. "Sometimes the best revenge," she said, "is writing it right." I smiled at that. Writing it right, that's what I'd been doing all along. One afternoon, while drafting the first piece, I realized something strange. I no longer hated her. I didn't forgive her either. Forgiveness requires wanting reconciliation. But the anger that once kept me alive had burned down too. Something cleaner, a steady kind of detachment. Sloane had taken my words, but she couldn't keep them. They had roots in me, and roots always grow back. When the first spring rain fell, I walked through the park without an umbrella, letting the drops soak into my clothes, washing away the remnants of winter. Children laughed near the fountain, the sound oddly healing. My reflection in the water looked new, softer, but unshaken. That's when I understood what Rowan meant when he said revenge is only the midpoint. After it, there's the quiet work of rebuilding. And that's where I finally was on the other side of noise, holding peace like proof. Days turned into weeks, and the world slowly forgot about Sloane Mercer. The internet moved on to its next spectacle, leaving behind a digital graveyard of cached headlines and broken links. Her accounts vanished one by one, deleted or renamed, as if erasing herself could undo what she'd done. Sometimes, I wondered if she still read my essays under a fake profile, trying to find herself between my lines. If she did, she'd find nothing there for her anymore. I had stopped writing about betrayal. I had started writing about endurance. Pain was her language. Survival was mine. One morning, Rowan dropped by with coffee and a flash drive. "Final report," he said, setting it on the table. The board settled. "Priya's filing is closed." I turned the drive over in my hand, the weight of it absurdly small for something that had once consumed my life. "That's it, then?" He smiled softly. "That's it. You can archive it or delete it. Your call." I stared at it for a moment, then placed it in the drawer beside my old notes. "Not yet," I said. "It's not revenge anymore. It's history." Rowan nodded, understanding without needing more words. "History deserves good storage," he said. That night, I finally cleaned out my messages. I deleted old voice notes, blocked numbers that lingered, like ghosts, and unfollowed anyone who'd stayed silent during the chaos. It wasn't bitterness, it was pruning. The people who'd watched me bleed didn't deserve a seat at my healing. I replaced my old group chats with new ones. A small writing circle Rowan had helped me start, focused on truth-telling and consent in art. There were only 5 of us, but it felt right. Safe, real. One evening, while preparing notes for our first session, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "Thank you for teaching me silence." My stomach tightened as I opened it. The message was short, no signature. "I'm leaving the city. I won't ask forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm done performing." I knew it was her. The phrasing was stripped of performance, the tone hollow in a way only real remorse could sound. I read it twice, then closed it. I didn't delete it, just archived it, the way one might store a storm warning after the sky clears. The workshop launched quietly that month. We met in the same riverside cafe where I used to hide from the world. Now, I sat at the front, teaching artists how to protect their digital rights, how to watermark their files, how to spot manipulation disguised as mentorship. I used anonymized versions of my story as examples, not to relive it but to redeem it. When one young poet asked, "How do you ever trust again?" I smiled gently. "You don't," I said. "You build systems so you don't have to." The room fell silent, but not uncomfortably. It was the kind of silence that comes when truth lands softly but deeply. After class, Rowan joined me for coffee. He looked at me across the table and said, "You know, you could publish this everything you've learned. It could help people." I stirred my cup, watching the swirl of cream and shadow. "Maybe," I said. "But for now, I just want to live it." He grinned. "Fair. Living is the best sequel." That night, I walked home, through the city that had once devoured me. It looked different now, not kinder, but more honest. The same lights, the same bridges, but they no longer felt like stages waiting to collapse. As I crossed the street, the reflection of the river caught my eye, dark, endless, shimmering. I stopped for a moment, breathing in the cold air, and whispered, "You can trust me." Not to her, not to anyone else, just to myself. The words no longer carried pain. They carried promise. Spring arrived slow and steady, the city finally thawing after months of gray. My new apartment overlooked a courtyard full of magnolia trees, their blooms opening like small miracles after everything had frozen. The world felt new again, but not because it had changed, because I had. Each morning I opened the windows and let the wind move through the curtains, that quiet kind of freedom you can't post or prove. I'd traded noise for stillness, validation for peace. My notebook was no longer evidence, it was creation again. The first story I wrote that spring had nothing to do with Sloane, betrayal, or revenge. It was about a woman learning to live without needing witnesses. My days found rhythm again, teaching workshops, writing essays, walking by the river in the evenings. Sometimes I'd see artists from the old co-op, people who once whispered about me. They smiled now, tentative but genuine, as if guilt had softened into respect. I returned the gesture and kept walking. The past didn't haunt me anymore. It just walked quietly behind me, a shadow that no longer frightened me. Rowan still visited often, always bringing coffee and some new piece of tech gossip. He'd tease me for using paper journals instead of encrypted drives. "Analog can't be hacked," I'd reply, smiling. It became our running joke, our proof that laughter could grow again where pain once lived. One evening, while sorting through my desk, I found the binder labeled Chain of Trust. The edges were worn. Now, the wax seal cracked. I placed it on the table and ran my fingers over the cover, remembering every sleepless night that lived inside those pages. For a moment, I considered burning it, turning it to ash, letting the wind carry it away. But I didn't. I closed it instead and tucked it back into the drawer. The story was over, but its lesson deserved to stay intact. Some memories aren't meant to be erased. They're meant to remind us how far we've come. I visited the river again that weekend, the same spot where everything began. The water shimmered under the fading sunlight, golden and endless. I whispered the same line I'd once said through tears. "You think I'll break." Only this time, my voice carried no anger, just strength. I smiled and added, "You were wrong." The wind picked up then, soft but insistent, carrying my words away. I liked to think the river understood. It had seen every version of me, the broken, the burning, and now the whole. When I got home, I set up my small camera to record again. The red light blinked, steady and familiar. "If you're hearing this," I began softly, "and someone's broken your trust, remember this. You don't owe them silence." I paused, breathing deeply. "You can rebuild, you can protect, you can rise, but never let them convince you that your truth needs their approval to matter." My voice didn't shake anymore. It flowed. "If this story found you when trust felt impossible," I finished, smiling gently, share and subscribe, because sometimes strength isn't in shouting. It's in learning how to speak again without fear. I turned off the camera, leaned back, and let the quiet wrap around me. For the first time in forever, I wasn't reliving my story. I was simply living. Summer came like a long exhale, warm and slow, the kind that makes you forget what winter ever felt like. My mornings began with sunlight spilling across my desk, not the glow of a laptop screen, but real light, the kind that didn't judge, didn't demand. I brewed coffee, opened my journal, and wrote whatever came to mind. Some days it was poetry, other days silence. Both felt holy. The city outside had moved on, but I had learned not to chase its rhythm. I walked instead, slower, softer, noticing details I used to miss, the way rain clung to leaves, the laughter of children echoing off stone walls, the hum of life that existed without audience. For the first time, I was learning the art of being unobserved, Rowan visited one afternoon carrying 2 iced coffees and a grin. "Your workshop's full again," he said, handing me a cup. "Guess people love hearing about trust from someone who survived it." I laughed, shaking my head. "Maybe they just want a story with an ending." He looked at me carefully. "You found one?" I thought about it before answering. "No." I stopped looking. "Some stories aren't meant to end. They're meant to evolve." He nodded, that small, understanding smile settling on his face. Before he left, he placed a small flash drive on my table. "Backup of your latest work," he said. "Just in case," I teased. "You really don't trust the cloud, do you?" He grinned. "No, but I trust you to forget to back up." That evening, I lit a candle and played soft jazz while reading messages from students who'd attended my sessions. One wrote, "Your story made me brave enough to share mine." Another said, "I used to think being betrayed meant I was foolish. Now I think it means I was open." Their words felt like healing threaded through strangers' hearts. I realized then that revenge had never been the ending, it had only been the bridge to understanding. What came after wasn't triumph. It was transformation. Before bed, I took out my old phone, the one I'd kept locked away since everything happened. It still held the fragments of that past life, screenshots, audio notes, messages that once cut like glass. My thumb hovered over the power button for a long moment before I pressed it. The screen flickered to life, and for the first time, I didn't flinch. I scrolled through, slow and deliberate, then pressed delete all. Every file vanished, the memory emptying itself in silence. I didn't need evidence anymore. The proof of survival was me. Later, I sat by the open window, moonlight spilling across the floor, and whispered the words that had once haunted me. "You can trust me." But this time, I wasn't hearing her voice. I was hearing my own. The words didn't sting now. They felt like reclamation, a promise to myself. Trust didn't have to mean surrender anymore. It could mean strength, honesty, self-respect. I smiled, realizing that maybe forgiveness wasn't for her, it was for the part of me that once believed her. When morning came, I uploaded a new video. My voice was calm, certain. "If you've ever been betrayed," I said softly, "don't. Let it make you smaller. Let it make you sharper. Betrayal isn't your ending, it's your edit. You can rewrite, rebuild, and remember without revenge. That's where real power lives." I paused, letting the silence hold my words before adding one final line, unique to this story. If this reached you when trust felt broken, like, share. And subscribe, because sometimes the loudest justice is simply reclaiming your own voice. I ended the recording, exhaled, and smiled. Outside, the sun rose slow and golden, lighting a city that no longer scared me. My story had started with a lie, but it ended with truth, and that was more than enough.